Clara Whitfield was 62 years old, and she had always believed that the hardest years of her life were behind her. She had survived being a single mother after her husband walked out when their son Lucas was just 3. She had worked double shifts at a diner, cleaned houses on weekends, and skipped more meals than she could count just to make sure Lucas never went without. Every wrinkle on her face, every ache in her back told a story of sacrifice for him. That morning, she sat in the living room of the home she had helped Lucas and his wife buy. A quiet strength in her voice as she spoke the words that would change everything. "I will not pay $50,000 for your anniversary cruise, Vanessa." The silence was instant and heavy. Vanessa's manicured fingers crushed the glossy cruise brochure in her hands. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp, laced with that cold tone she reserved for making someone feel small. Clara had heard it plenty in the 5 years since Lucas married her. "I heard you," Clara said, shoulder straight, "and the answer is no." Vanessa stood, her tall frame casting a shadow over Clara. "This isn't a request," she said slowly, as though speaking to a stubborn child. "I understand perfectly," Clara replied, her tone steady. "Still, no." The crack of Vanessa's hand meeting Clara's cheek was louder than either of them expected. Heat spread across Clara's face, but she stayed seated. Vanessa's composure slipped as she shouted, "Then find somewhere else to live. I'm done supporting a selfish old woman." Clara turned to Lucas, waiting for him to tell his wife she had crossed a line. Instead, he looked away. "Maybe it's time you found your own place, Mom. Vanessa's right. We've been carrying you for too long." Her chest tightened. Carrying her. Clara had been paying rent every month, buying groceries, helping with utilities, even giving them the down payment for their car. She wanted to remind them of the $20,000 she'd given for their wedding, but she could see it in their faces. None of it mattered now. Lucas's next words stung worse than the slap. "I'll need that $50,000 plus whatever else you've saved. Think of it as paying us back." Clara rose slowly, gripping her purse. "I'll pack my thing," she said, her voice calm but final. It was the moment her old life ended. As Clara climbed the stairs to her small upstairs room, memories flooded her mind, each one carrying the weight of years gone by. She could still see herself in that tiny apartment, years ago, rocking baby Lucas to sleep after a long double shift at the diner. She had been 25 then, with no family nearby, no savings, and no one to lean on but herself. Back then, she worked at 2 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings waiting tables at a diner, sometimes squeezing in weekend house cleaning gigs for extra cash. Her hands were always chapped from hot water and cleaning chemicals, her feet aching from endless hours on the move. But every time she looked at Lucas, she knew why she kept going. When Lucas turned 18, Clara celebrated by paying his college deposit in full. She skipped upgrading her old car that year, even though it broke down twice so that he could start his education without debt. She still remembered the pride in his eyes when he walked across the stage at graduation. When Lucas met Vanessa, Clara welcomed her warmly. She bought a beautiful dress for their wedding, even though she could have worn something she already owned. The wedding gift, $20,000 from her savings money she had been setting aside for her own retirement. "It's for your future," she had told them. "Start your life together on solid ground." A year later, they wanted a bigger house. Clara dipped into her savings again, helping with the down payment. Then came the monthly rent she paid to live with them, plus extra for groceries, utilities, and even covering part of their car loan when they were short. But as Vanessa settled into the household, Clara began noticing small changes. Invitations to outings with her old friends got lost or came too late for her to attend. Vanessa always had a reason why Clara couldn't visit certain relatives or why no one should come over. At first, Clara brushed it off as coincidence. Eventually, Z realized she was being isolated. Still, she stayed. She told herself it was worth it to be close to Lucas to see him often. Maybe if she was helpful enough, needed enough, they would truly want her there. Now standing in the small bedroom where she'd kept her few belongings, Clara could see the truth clearly. The sacrifices she had made were never truly appreciated. They had been expected. She had been pouring into a well that would never be full. Tonight, she would leave carrying only what fit in her car, and for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe that could be the start of something better. Clara folded her clothes slowly, not because there was much to pack, but because each item carried a story. The faded blue sweater had kept her warm during long shifts in cold diners. The floral scarf had been a gift from a corker years ago when she couldn't afford anything new. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of photo albums. Her life reduced to what could fit into the trunk of her car. Downstairs, she could hear Vanessa on the phone, her voice bright and cheerful now that Clara was leaving. "Yes, Mom," Vanessa was saying. She finally agreed to move out. "We have the house to ourselves again. Oh, and she might help with the cruise as a parting gift." Clara paused at the bottom of the stairs, the words settling heavily in her chest. Vanessa was rewriting the story already, painting herself as the generous hostess and Clara as the one who chose to go. Lucas was nowhere to be seen. She imagined him in his home office, avoiding her eyes, avoiding the truth of what they'd done. Cowardice had settled over him like a second skin. Outside, the cool evening air wrapped around her as she loaded her belongings into her 15-year-old sedan. The car was a little battered, but it was hers paid for in full. At least that was one thing no one could take from her. She sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at the quiet street. The neighborhood was full of well-kept houses with flower beds and trimmed lawns. Behind those doors, she imagined families laughing, talking, sharing meals. And here she was, alone, unwanted, with nowhere to go. Clara started the engine and drove aimlessly. She passed the diner where she had worked weekends for extra cash, the laundromat where she had spent countless Saturdays, the park where she used to take Lucas when he was small. Every place was a reminder of a life built on love and sacrifice, love that had been repaid with coldness. By nightfall, she found herself in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her cheek was still red from Vanessa's slap, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked, she thought bitterly, exactly like what she was, a woman discarded by her own child. But somewhere under the ache and humiliation, something stirred. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't despair. It was a flicker of resolve, maybe even anger. She checked her bank account on her phone. $87,000 in savings. Not a fortune, but more than Vanessa and Lucas had guessed. Money earned through decades of work that had left her with back pain and worn hands. She realized she had been saving for them, always for them. Every dollar was meant to keep her family comfortable, to fill in the gaps when they fell short. But they had turned her into a source of funds, not a person. The question pressed in her mind as she sipped a cup of cheap coffee inside the diner. If she wasn't living for them anymore, what could she live for? On the 4th morning of living out of her car, Clara awoke to the sound of gulls overhead and the faint scent of salt in the air. She had parked near the marina, not sure why. Maybe she had been drawn by the thought of water open, endless and free. She stepped out, stretching stiff muscles, and walked along the weathered wooden planks of the dock. The morning sun glittered on the surface of the harbor, and towering above the smaller fishing boats was a massive cruise ship, its gleaming white hull catching the light. Claire paused to take it in. She had never been on a cruise, never dreamed of such luxury for herself, but she could imagine the feeling of failing away from all her troubles. Movement on the ship caught her eye. A man stood on the deck, tall, wearing a crisp white captain's uniform. His silver hair stirred in the breeze. Something about the way he carried himself tugged at her memory. And then it hit her: Michael Carver. Her heart skipped. It had been over 40 years since she had last seen him, back when they were both 22 and working summer jobs at a marine supply company. He had been her first love, the one she thought she might marry before life sent them in different directions. Before she could decide whether to turn away, Michael looked down from the deck and their eyes met. Recognition lit his face, followed by a wide smile. He raised a hand in greeting, and moments later he was striding toward the gangway. "Clara Whitfield," he called out, using her maiden name like it was yesterday. "It's Whitfield still," she said with a faint smile. "Though I don't know if it means much anymore." When he reached her, he didn't hesitate. "You look like you could use a good meal and a strong cup of coffee." She laughed softly. "That obvious?" "I've been at sea for decades," he said warmly. "I can read storms in people's faces as easily as I can read the weather." Within minutes, she found herself walking up the gangway, following him through elegant corridors with marble floors and chandeliers. He led her to the captain's quarters, a space more luxurious than any apartment she'd ever lived in. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the harbor. Over steaming mugs of coffee, she told him everything: how her husband had left when Lucas was small, the years of working herself to exhaustion, the wedding gift and house down payment, the monthly rent, and finally the demand for $50,000 followed by eviction. She spoke haltingly at first, but Michael listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening at the cruelty of it. When she finished, he set down his cup. "Clara, what they did to you, that's abuse, financial and emotional." "I wouldn't call it that," she protested weakly. "I would," he said firmly. "And I'm not just the captain of this ship. I'm part owner of Carver Maritime. We're expanding and need someone to oversee guest services across the fleet. You've been handling difficult people and tight budgets your whole life. You're exactly the kind of person we need." She shook her head. "I don't know the first thing about running a cruise line. You know how to take care of people, solve problems, and keep things running when it matters most," Michael replied. "The rest I can teach you." For the first time in weeks, Clara felt something she hadn't dared to hope. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering a chance to rebuild, to step into something entirely her own. "What do you say?" he asked, his eyes steady on hers. Clara took a deep breath. "I say, maybe it's time to find out what else I can be." The next morning, Clara moved into a furnished one-bedroom apartment overlooking the harbor, temporary housing provided by Carver Maritime. While she began training, the place felt strange at first. Spotless white walls, new appliances, a bed that didn't sag in the middle, but it also felt like a clean slate, an empty page, waiting to be written on. Michael wasted no time. By 9 o'clock, she was seated in the company's headquarters, a sleek glass building just a short walk from the marina. Her days quickly filled with lessons in cruise line operations, guest services, protocols, safety regulations, scheduling, vendor relations. At first, it was overwhelming. She had never seen so many binders, charts, and training manuals in her life. But Michael was right. She already knew more than she realized. Years of stretching a grocery budget translated into cost management. Decades of smoothing over cranky customers at diners became conflict resolution. Running a household alone for years had given her an instinct for logistics and problem-solving. By the end of the second week, she was leading small team meetings to discuss passenger feedback and brainstorm improvements. "You're a natural," Michael told her one afternoon, handing her a printed report with glowing comments from staff she'd worked alongside. She felt her cheeks warm, not from embarrassment, but from a quiet pride she hadn't felt in years. She took the $50,000 she'd refused to give Lucas and invested it into the company, securing a 25% partnership in Carver Maritime's guest services division. This wasn't a loan or a gift. It was her stake in a business where her voice mattered. Michael also insisted on updating her wardrobe. "You can't run guest services dressed like you're about to scrub floors," he teased kindly. At first, she resisted old habits, whispered that spending money on herself was wasteful. But the first time she slipped on a tailored blazer and looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back had sharp lines in her posture, a glint of confidence in her eyes. She was no longer the invisible presence in someone else's home. In the evenings, she and Michael often shared dinner, sometimes at upscale restaurants along the harbor, sometimes take out in his apartment. They talked about business, about the places he'd sailed, about the summers they'd once spent together. He never pressed for more, but there was an ease between them, a trust that had survived decades apart. 3 weeks into training, Michael slid a folder across the table to her. "We've got a Caribbean cruise next month launching a new guest services program. I want you on board as our Vice President of Guest Services." Clara blinked. "Vice President? You've earned it," he said simply. "And it'll give you the perfect opportunity to see everything in action." She hesitated only a moment before smiling. "All right, let's see where the ship can take me." The Sib Breeze, Carver Maritime's newest ship, was a floating city with 15 decks, a crew of 600, and space for more than 1,000 passengers. Clara boarded 2 weeks before departure to familiarize herself with the layout, the staff, and the intricate rhythm of life at sea. Her cabin was on the same deck as Michael's, connected by a private corridor neither of them talked about, but both appreciated. The morning of embarkation, Clara stood on the bridge beside Michael, watching streams of passengers board. Families wrestled with luggage, couples posed for selfies against the gleaming white hull, and crew members in crisp uniforms guided them aboard with practice smiles. Then Michael's voice broke the hum of activity. "Portside gangway," he said, nodding toward a couple making their way up. Clara's stomach tightened. Even from a distance, she recognized Lucas and Vanessa. Lucas trailed behind with their luggage, shoulders hunched. Vanessa led the way, sunglasses perched high on her head, pulling a porter aside to complain about the pace. "Remember," Michael said quietly. "Today you're vice president, Whitfield here to observe guest services. They don't know who you are yet. Clara adjusted the lapel of her navy blazer, the Carver Maritime crest gleaming in the morning light. She headed down to the atrium where new passengers stopped at the guest services desk for information or upgrades. Vanessa was already there, speaking sharply to Maria, the department head. "There's been a mistake," Vanessa declared. "We booked a balcony suite, but you've put us in an interior room. That's unacceptable." Maria checked her screen. "Your confirmation shows an interior cabin. We do have balcony suites available, but the upgrade fee is $800 per night." Luca shifted uncomfortably. "We can't," he started, but Vanessa cut him off. "I'll take it." "Actually," Clara interjected, stepping forward with a pleasant smile. "I might be able to help." She introduced herself as Vice President of Guest Services, shaking hands as if meeting strangers. Neither showed a flicker of recognition. "I do have a balcony suite available due to a cancellation," Clara continued, "and as a gesture for your anniversary, I can waive the upgrade fee. There is one condition: you'll be working directly with me throughout your cruise." "That sounds perfect," Vanessa said, her smile turning triumphant. Over the next 3 days, Clara shadowed them as their concierge. She booked their dinner reservations, arranged spa treatments, and listened to every complaint. Towels not fluffy enough, the pool too crowded, the wine list missing Vanessa's favorite label. Lucas barely acknowledged her, eyes fixed on his phone or the floor. Through the ship's monitoring system installed for training and quality control, Clara saw more. Behind closed doors, Vanessa's voice was sharp and constant. "You're a disappointment," she told Lucas one evening as they dressed for dinner. "At least when your mother was paying for everything, we could pretend to be comfortable." By the third afternoon, Clara was in the main dining room when she heard Vanessa's voice rise above the lunch chatter. She was standing berating Carmen, a young waitress from the Philippines, for bringing her salad with dressing already on it. "People like you shouldn't be working in hospitality," Vanessa snapped, ignoring Carmen's polite apology. Claire crossed the room, her voice calm, but carrying authority. "Is there a problem here?" Vanessa turned, relief flashing across her face. "Yes, this waitress messed up my order. I want her fired." Clara met Carmen's eyes. "Carmen is one of our best employees, recognized for excellent service. I'm confident she followed your order correctly." Vanessa's tone turned icy. "Are you contradicting me?" "I'm providing accurate information," Claire replied evenly. It was then that Lucas looked up and really saw her. His eyes widened, his face draining of color. "Mom," he whispered. The dining room went silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Vanessa's gaze shot between Lucas and Clara, confusion twisting into disbelief. "Mom," she echoed, her voice barely audible. Clara straightened, her expression calm but unyielding. "Hello, Lucas and Vanessa." Vanessa blinked rapidly, as though trying to piece together a puzzle that shouldn't exist. You're supposed to be homeless, desperate, begging to come back." Clara finished for her. "I was briefly, but things change." Lucas's voice was shaky. How are you here on this ship?" "I work here," Clara said simply. "In fact, I own part of this company, Vice President of Guest Services, which means every aspect of your vacation falls under my care." Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Around them, diners were watching with the fascination usually reserved for high drama on television. Carmen stood frozen nearby, clutching her order pad. "As for your complaint," Clara continued, "Carmen did her job exactly as ordered. I won't be firing her for your mistake." She turned to Carmen with a small smile. "Thank you for your professionalism. You can return to your tables." Carmen nodded and retreated, relief in her eyes. Clara faced Lucas and Vanessa again. "Enjoy the rest of your lunch. We'll have time to catch up later." But Vanessa stepped forward, lowering her voice, though not enough to avoid being overheard. "We need to talk privately. This is all a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Clara replied evenly. "You made your feelings about me very clear." Lucas swallowed hard. "Mom, please. Things have been difficult since you left. We've had some financial problems. We could lose the house." Clara's expression didn't change. "And you think that's my responsibility?" "We're family," Lucas said desperately. "We were family," Clara corrected softly. "Until you threw me out and demanded my savings." Vanessa's composure cracked. "You have money now, more than enough to help us." "And yet I won't," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but final. "I'm done." sacrificing my well-being to fix problems you created. You've been living beyond your means, expecting someone else to catch you when you fall. That's over." Lucas's shoulders sagged, but then he straightened suddenly as though grasping at a last chance. "If it's Vanessa, I'll end it. I'll leave her. Just don't cut me out." Clara studied him for a long moment. "This isn't about choosing between her and me. It's about the choices you made all on your own. I can't trust you. And trust, once broken, doesn't return easily." Michael appeared at Clara's side, his presence solid and reassuring. He glanced at Lucas and Vanessa, then at Clara. "Everything all right here?" "Perfectly," Clara said. They were just leaving. The conversation ended there, though Clara could feel their eyes on her as she walked away with Michael. The next morning, Lucas and Vanessa disembarked at the first port of call. They didn't finish the cruise. Clara watched their tenderboat carry them to shore from the captain's deck. She felt no triumph, only a peaceful sense of closure. That evening, she stood at the rail as the ship cut through calm waters under a sky painted gold by the setting sun. Michael joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "How do you feel?" he asked. Clara took a slow sip, then smiled. "Free, for the first time in decades. Truly free." Michael touched his glass to hers. "To new beginnings." She looked out at the endless horizon, the hum of the engines beneath her feet, and the promise of destinations yet to come. To everything still ahead, she agreed. At 62, Clara Whitfield was no longer someone's safety net. No longer the invisible giver whose worth was measured in dollars. She was a partner, a leader, a woman who had finally chosen herself. And that choice, she knew, had changed everything.